I never thought the lake behind my house would turn against me. One morning, I stepped onto my dock, fishing rod in hand, and froze. The water had turned a sickly green, thick with algae and the stench of rot. Dozens of fish floated belly up near the shore. My peaceful morning ritual, dead. Then I saw her, Karen, our HOA president, standing by her SUV with that smug smile and a clipboard in hand. She said it was for the good of the community that my fishing was unsightly, but as I stared at the poisoned water, I realized something she didn't. This lake fed the very pipes that brought water to her home. I've lived beside this lake for nearly 10 years. When I first bought the property, the water was clean enough to see the reflection of the pines that lined the far shore. Fishing wasn't just a hobby, it was how I cleared my head after long weeks at work. I'd wake up before sunrise, brew a pot of black coffee, and cast my line while the world was still asleep. It wasn't about the catch. It was about the quiet. But ever since the new HOA president, Karen, took over last year, quiet has become a luxury. She showed up one afternoon with a clipboard and a grin so stiff it could crack glass. "You're in violation of HOA aesthetics," she said, pointing toward my fishing chair and tackle box like they were offensive graffiti. I laughed at first, thinking she was joking, but she wasn't. She handed me a paper, citing some nonsense about unsightly recreational clutter visible from the street. My dock was barely visible from the road, unless someone really tried to look for trouble. And Karen always did. At first, I tried to keep the peace. I moved my chair a few feet. I even bought a new, smaller cooler so it wouldn't obstruct the view. But that only made her bolder. Next came the noise complaints. "We've had reports of loud splashing early in the morning," she said one day. "It's disrupting community tranquility, splashes, from casting my fishing line." I thought about telling her the frogs and ducks were louder than me, but I knew logic wasn't her language. Power was. Neighbors warned me to just pay the fines, ignore her, or move my fishing gear inside. But I wasn't about to let some clipboard tyrant dictate what I did on my own property. This lake wasn't just water to me, it was peace. It was mine, and if she wanted a war over it, I wasn't going to back down. A few days later, I noticed her SUV parked near the edge of the property. She'd sit there with binoculars, snapping pictures like she was running a sting operation. The first time I waved, she sped off. The second time, she called the police to inspect my dock for unapproved modifications. The officer was polite but embarrassed. "Sorry, sir," he said. "We get these calls all the time." I nodded, but inside, something was starting to boil. Karen thought she was untouchable, that she could manipulate the HOA board and bully me into giving up my lake. But she didn't know me. I wasn't a man who scared easy. And I sure as hell wasn't going to let her poison my peace without a fight. At the time, I didn't know how far she'd go. But looking back, the signs were all there. The fake smiles, the cryptic comments about cleaning up the lake, and her sudden obsession with HOA water usage policies. Whatever she was planning, it was bigger than just me. And when it finally hit, the entire neighborhood would pay for it. The first sign something was wrong came a week later. I noticed the water line dropping. Not by much, but enough to expose a line of dark mud along the edge. I thought it was just summer heat, but then came the smell, faint at first, like rotten eggs drifting off the surface. I'd never smelled anything like it in all my years here. The fish weren't biting anymore, and the frogs had vanished. Karen, of course, had an explanation. She cornered me at the mailbox one afternoon, smiling too sweetly. "You know, Jack, maybe the lake's turning because of all that bait you use. It's probably polluting the water. We might have to discuss new fishing restrictions." I stared at her. "You're saying my bait caused a 10-acre lake to rot overnight?" She shrugged. "You'd be surprised how fragile ecosystems are when people abuse them." Then she walked off, her heels crunching on the gravel like nails on a coffin. A few days later, I woke up to the sound of splashing near the dock. When I looked out my window, I saw two men in reflective vests unloading plastic drums from a flatbed truck. Karen stood nearby with her clipboard, giving instructions. "I threw on my boots and stormed out. What the hell do you think you're doing?" I shouted. She turned unfazed. "Environmental maintenance," she said. "The HOA has decided to treat the water to reduce algae buildup." I looked at the drums, each labeled caution, chemical treatment. "You can't dump that here. This is private property," she smirked. "Actually, Jack, it's shared water access. It borders multiple HOA lots. You should have read your agreement more carefully." The two men started rolling the barrels toward the water. My blood boiled. I grabbed my phone and started recording. "You pour one drop in that lake," I said, "and I'll have you charged with contamination." Karen crossed her arms. "Go ahead. You'll only make yourself look unstable." I called the county environmental office that same day, but they were slow to respond. Bureaucracy moved like sludge. By the time an inspector showed up, the damage was done. The water had turned pale green and cloudy. Every fish was dead. Karen stood nearby when the inspector arrived, pretending to be concerned. "We warned him," she said. "He was using chemicals for his bait. We believe it caused the reaction. The inspector took samples but said it might take weeks to test." Karen smirked the whole time, knowing she'd gotten away with it, at least for now. That night, I sat on the dock staring at the water. My reflection was gone, replaced by a sheet of slime. I could still hear her voice echoing in my head. Shared water access. It didn't make sense. I owned this property every inch up to the tree line. But she knew something I didn't. Something about how the HOA mapped the utilities. I started digging through property records, old maps, water permits, anything I could find. And that's when I stumbled on a small line in the documents. Lake Rainer, shared watershed access, community filtration intake, south sector. My jaw tightened. The HOA's drinking water came straight from my lake, and Karen, she'd just poisoned it. The more I read, the angrier I became. The HOA's bylaws were full of hidden loopholes, all written to give them control over shared utilities. Apparently, when the neighborhood was first built, the developer created a community watershed system. My lake wasn't just decorative. It was the main source that filtered into the HOA's underground water supply. It meant that technically, the HOA had partial jurisdiction, but the line was blurred, deliberately, I realized. I called the county office again and asked for the original engineering maps. The clerk said the file had been checked out by an HOA representative the week before. Guess who that was? Karen. She wasn't trying to protect the community. She was covering her tracks. The more I pieced it together, the more obvious it became. She'd poisoned the lake to make me look like the problem. But the contamination would eventually backfire, literally. Within a few days, the smell got worse. Neighbors started complaining. A woman across the street told me her tap water smelled like sulfur. Another said her kids got rashes after bathing. But Karen? She blamed me. She went door to door with printed flyers titled HOA Alert, Local Contamination Source Identified. My name was in bold at the bottom. That night, my phone lit up with angry messages. Some neighbors called me reckless. Others demanded I stop dumping chemicals. It was surreal. The woman who actually poisoned the lake had turned the entire neighborhood against me. The next morning, I found 2 police cars parked by the dock. Karen was there, arms folded, giving her usual speech. I walked out calmly, though my hands were shaking. "Mr. Rainer," one of the officers said, "we received multiple complaints regarding environmental damage and suspected dumping." I pointed toward the barrels that were still sitting near the shoreline. "Those came from the HOA, not me." "You can check the footage. I recorded it," Karen scoffed. "He's been harassing our maintenance workers, officer. We were just trying to clean up the mess he made." One of the cops glanced between us, clearly unsure who to believe. "We'll file a report," he said finally. "Environmental Services will follow up." As they left, Karen smirked. "You really should stop filming people without consent, Jack. That's a violation." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "You poisoned your own damn water supply. And when the tests come back, everyone will know it." Her eyes narrowed for the first time. Not mockery, but fear. Just a flicker, but I saw it. Then she smiled again, too wide, and walked away. That night, I sent copies of my video to every neighbor, the HOA board, and the county inspector. I didn't say a word in the email, just attached the footage and wrote, "Thought you'd want to see who's really responsible." The next morning, the messages flipped. "Is this real? Karen dumped chemicals? My water's coming out green." It spread fast. Karen tried damage control, claiming the video was misleading, that the HOA had proper permits. But by then, people had started connecting dots. A few even called the local news, and as I sat watching the sun rise over that poisoned lake, I felt something shift. For the first time in weeks, I wasn't angry. I was patient, because I knew what came next wasn't revenge anymore. It was exposure, and when truth hits daylight, even an HOA can't hide in the shade. The county lab results came in 4 days later, faster than expected. The inspector called me early in the morning, voice tight. "Mr. Rayner, you were right. The sample shows extremely high levels of copper sulfate and nitrates. It's a deliberate contamination, not runoff or organic decay." I stood on my deck, staring at the lake as he spoke. The green water looked thicker now, swirling like oil. "So what happens next?" I asked. "Well," he said, "if someone authorized that treatment without a permit, they're liable under state environmental law. We'll need statements, documentation, anything you've got." I had more than that. I had video, timestamps, witnesses, and now scientific proof. But if I'd learned anything about Karen, it was that she thrived in silence, in private manipulation. I couldn't just go through legal channels. I needed to make sure the entire neighborhood saw her for what she really was. That night, I made a plan. I spent hours editing the footage I'd recorded, trimming the fluff, adding clear timestamps, and overlaying the county's contamination report. When I was done, I uploaded it to a shared neighborhood drive and titled it simply, "What Really Happened to the Lake." Within minutes, it started spreading. By the next morning, it had hundreds of views. Not viral by internet standards, but viral enough for the HOA. When I stepped outside, neighbors who used to glare at me now avoided Karen. Her morning routine of walking the block clipboard in hand stopped cold. Instead, she was on her phone constantly, snapping at whoever was on the other end. By the afternoon, the HOA board called an emergency meeting. I wasn't invited, of course, but I didn't need to be. I parked my truck across the street and watched people file into the community hall, whispering. Some looked angry, others scared. 2 hours later, Karen stormed out. Her usually perfect hair was frizzed, and her blazer looked wrinkled. She saw me watching and shouted across the lot. "You think this is over, Jack? You're destroying this community!" I crossed my arms. "No, Karen. You did that the moment you poured poison into the water." Her face twisted, caught between fury and panic. "You'll regret this," I smiled. "You first." That night, I got a knock on my door. It was Officer Hayes, one of the cops who'd visited earlier. He looked uncomfortable. "Mr. Rayner, we're opening an official investigation. The HOA president's actions might have violated state environmental protection codes." "Good," I said. "About time someone took it seriously," he nodded. "We'll need you to stay available for questioning. There's a lot of media attention now. Some residents can't use their tap water. They've been told not to bathe in it." I glanced past him toward the lake. "You mean they're finally realizing what she did?" He sighed. "Yeah, but this is going to get messy." I closed the door, heart pounding. For the first time in weeks, I felt something close to peace. But I knew Karen wasn't done yet. The kind of person who poisons a lake and lies about it doesn't surrender quietly. As night fell, I stood by the dock and watched the faint glow of porch lights reflecting on the poisoned surface. I knew I'd exposed her, but now she'd try to drag me down with her. The war had just gone public. The next morning, I woke up to chaos. My phone was buzzing nonstop. Calls from neighbors, reporters, even someone from the county water board. Apparently, the contamination had spread farther than anyone realized. Entire sections of the neighborhood were under a "do not consume" order. Faucets were spitting out murky greenish water. Lawns were dying. Pools were clouding over, and through it all, Karen had vanished. I watched from my porch as a county hazmat team arrived, their trucks marked with environmental emergency response. They set up yellow tape around the lake while neighbors gathered, shouting questions and demanding answers. I didn't go near them. I didn't need to. My part of the plan had already begun. The public exposure was only step one. Step two was making sure Karen couldn't shift the blame. That afternoon, I drove to City Hall with a thick folder, copies of the HOA's internal messages I'd found accidentally months ago when Karen asked me to help fix her laptop's Wi-Fi. I hadn't looked through them at the time, but after what she'd done, I went back. Buried in her emails were multiple authorizations for water treatment actions, written in her tone, signed with her name, and sent to a cheap local contractor. She hadn't just poisoned the lake. She'd paid someone to do it without permits. The city clerk who took my report stared wide-eyed as I handed over the evidence. "Mr. Rayner, this could lead to felony charges," she said quietly. "Then let it," I replied. By evening, word had spread that investigators were issuing subpoenas. HOA board members were lawyering up. A local reporter from Channel 9 even showed up on my driveway, microphone in hand. "Mr. Rayner, is it true that the HOA intentionally contaminated your lake?" I glanced at the camera. "It's not my opinion anymore," I said. "It's on record. What they did wasn't just illegal, it was reckless. And now, everyone's paying for it." That clip aired that night, and within hours, the story exploded online. The comment section was full of outrage. "She should be arrested. That's environmental terrorism. HOA gone too far again." Karen finally appeared the next morning, not in person, but on a shaky live video she posted in the neighborhood group. She looked haggard, makeup smudged, hair unkempt. "Everyone needs to calm down," she snapped. "This is being blown out of proportion. We were treating the lake for algae. That man," she jabbed her finger at the camera, "is twisting the story." But her denial came too late. Behind her in the video, her own lawn sprinklers were running, spraying the same greenish, contaminated water onto her grass. Within seconds, people noticed. Screenshots spread like wildfire. That was step 3. I didn't even have to lift a finger. By mid-afternoon, the county health department posted a notice. All residents within HOA District 4 are advised not to use tap water until further notice. The entire neighborhood turned on her. Standing on my dock, I watched as a dozen homeowners surrounded her house. Some shouted. Some just recorded her. A police cruiser rolled up beside the curb. Karen came out screaming, waving papers, insisting it wasn't her fault. I didn't join the crowd. I just watched, calm, quiet, satisfied. Because revenge doesn't always need fire or fury. Sometimes it's just truth, exposed to sunlight. And that day, Karen was burning in it. By the time the weekend rolled around, our quiet lakeside neighborhood looked like a crime scene. Hazmat crews had sealed off the shore, cops were stationed at both entrances, and local news vans lined the street. Every major outlet in the county had picked up the story. HOA president accused of poisoning community water source. Karen's downfall was unfolding in real time. I sat on my porch with a cup of black coffee, watching the circus unfold. The air smelled of chemicals and damp soil. The lake, my lake, shimmered an unnatural green under the harsh midday sun. I couldn't help but think how poetic it was. The same color as her envy, her arrogance. Then came the moment I'd been waiting for. A black SUV pulled up beside her driveway, followed by a county environmental officer and 2 uniformed police officers. Karen burst out of her house, voice shrill even from a distance. "You can't just barge in here. This is harassment. I run this neighborhood." The officer remained calm, handing her a folder. "Ma'am, this is an official notice. You're being charged with illegal dumping of toxic substances into a protected water source. You have the right to remain silent." The camera crews surged forward, microphones extended. Karen tried to push past them, waving her hands frantically. "This is ridiculous. He's lying," she screamed, pointing toward me across the street. "Jack Rayner's been trying to ruin me for months." I stood from my chair, hands in my pockets, watching silently as she continued to unravel. "Karen," I said evenly, "you ruined yourself the moment you touched that lake." Her eyes blazed with hatred, but before she could respond, the officers gently took her by the arm and began escorting her to the SUV. Flashbulbs went off like fireworks. Neighbors recorded everything, murmuring under their breath. Some clapped. Karen twisted in their grip, yelling, "You think this changes anything? You're just as pathetic as that filthy water you love so much." The door slammed shut behind her. The SUV rolled away, taillights flashing red against the pavement. For the first time in weeks, I exhaled. The silence that followed was surreal. A few neighbors approached me cautiously. One man, and a retired engineer named Paul, offered a nod. "You did the right thing, Jack. She's been out of control for years." I shrugged. All I did was tell the truth. Later that evening, as the sun dipped low, I walked to the lake again. The cleanup crews were gone for the night, but the caution tape still fluttered in the breeze. The water rippled faintly, streaks of green fading slowly as the treatment took effect. I crouched by the dock, dipping a glass vial into the surface. It wasn't perfect yet, not even close, but it was healing, and so was I. The soft hum of crickets replaced the sirens, the yelling, the chaos. I could finally hear the quiet again, the kind of peace that only comes after a storm. Then I noticed something glinting near the edge of the dock. A piece of Karen's pink blazer, torn and stuck in the reeds. I picked it up and smirked. Poetic justice had a color after all. I turned back toward my house, feeling lighter than I had in months. Tomorrow I'd start rebuilding the dock. Maybe reintroduce fish next season. The lake deserved a second chance, just like I did. 3 months later, the lake didn't look poisoned anymore. The water was clear again, not perfect but alive. The algae was gone, fish had started to return, and the ducks came back one early morning as if nothing had ever happened. The HOA, on the other hand, didn't recover as quickly. Karen's arrest sent shockwaves through the neighborhood. The board disbanded within weeks, several members resigning quietly to avoid scrutiny. A new committee formed, one that actually listened to residents, led by Paul, the retired engineer who'd stood by me during the chaos. He stopped by one afternoon, leaning on my fence with a smile. "The county finalized it," he said. "She's been charged with felony environmental contamination and fraud. Looks like she'll be out of our hair for a long while." I nodded slowly, taking in the calm surface of the lake. "She poisoned her own water just to hurt someone else," I said. "It's fitting she's the one who ended up choking on it." Paul chuckled. "Well, the neighborhood owes you a beer or 10. "I'll take peace and quiet instead," I said, smirking. He left soon after, and I walked down to the dock. The wood was new, rebuilt stronger than before with stainless bolts and pressure-treated planks. At the end of it sat my old fishing rod, waiting. For the first time in months, I cast a line into the water. The ripple spread wide, catching sunlight like silver threads. The sound, the soft splash, the hum of the reel, felt like coming home. Behind me, I heard kids laughing. A few families had started coming back to the lake, setting up picnic blankets near the shore. Someone had even hung a sign on the community board. "Lakeview is healing, together." I smiled. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. It's about restoration, about reclaiming what someone tried to take from you. Karen had tried to poison my peace, my home, my morning ritual. But in the end, she poisoned her own kingdom. A few days later, I got a letter from the county, an official acknowledgement that the lake had been fully cleared, and that my cooperation helped identify the contamination source. They even renamed the site on the environmental registry, Rainer Lake. I didn't ask for that, but I won't lie, it felt damn good. That evening, as the sun dipped behind the trees, I sat on the edge of the dock again. The reflection of the sky turned the lake orange and pink, a living painting. I thought about everything. The fights, the sleepless nights, the shouting matches, the camera flashes, the sirens. All of it had started because someone couldn't stand to see me happy doing something simple. Now, every time I see the water ripple, I remember peace is worth fighting for. And sometimes, revenge means letting the truth float to the surface until everyone can see it. I reeled in my line, smiling faintly at the glint of a fish beneath the surface. The lake was alive again, and so was I. If you enjoyed watching Karen's downfall as much as I did living it, hit that like button and subscribe for more wild HOA revenge stories. Drop a comment below. What would you have done if someone poisoned your lake? And remember, sometimes karma doesn't knock. It ripples.